I should have known something was off when Layla's sister offered up that nervous smile. She's just having dinner with a few friends, Mia said, standing on my front porch with her hands tucked too tightly into her coat pockets. You don't have to worry about anything. It's not that kind of party. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Maybe part of me wanted to. We were a week out from the wedding after all. Layla and I had spent the last year buried in spreadsheets, flower samples, and food tastings. The bachelorette party was supposed to be her night to unwind. Mia was the one who organized it. She said it would be classy, low-key. I had no reason not to trust her. Not really. And yet, that gut feeling had been gnawing at me all week. Little things. Layla's phone suddenly had a lock screen. She changed her perfume twice. She'd grown strangely distant at home, like she was playing a part and barely holding onto the script. When I kissed her cheek 2 nights ago, she flinched. Not overtly, not enough for anyone to notice, but I did. I noticed. So I told myself I was just being romantic, just being sweet. I bought a silver heart-shaped pendant she once admired in a boutique we'd passed downtown. A surprise. A thoughtful one. I figured I'd show up with it, walk into her bachelorette dinner, say something cute and sappy, and head home. Layla would laugh. Her friends would It'd be another memory before the big day. But that's not what happened. The Eclipse Club was one of those places that looked polished outside and pulsed with chaos inside. Velvet ropes. Tinted glass. I could hear the bass before I even reached the front door. A doorman gave me a glance, but I told him I was meeting someone upstairs and he waved me through. The main floor was packed, flashing lights, people bumping into each other, drinks spilling in slow motion. I cut through the crowd, heading toward the back where the stairs were. According to Mia, they'd rented out a private lounge. Just the girls, she said. Think more wine and cheese, less sh*ts and strippers. As I climbed the staircase, my hand brushed the velvet box in my coat pocket. It still felt like the right thing to do. Maybe I needed to see her tonight, not to check in, but to reassure myself. We'd been a little off lately, sure, but that's normal, right? Pre-wedding nerves. Stress. The pressure of it all. The door to the lounge wasn't locked. Just slightly ajar. I pushed it open without knocking, eager to catch that look of surprise on her face. But she wasn't surprised. She was kneeling. Layla, my Layla, was on the floor in front of a man. Not just any man. Garrett. Her boss. His legs were parted, the sleeves of his blazer rolled up casually like he owned the room. Her hands were resting on his thighs. His expression was relaxed, almost smug. She leaned toward him, her face close, too close. Inches away. Like she was whispering something, or maybe. No. My feet were frozen to the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even think. My mind screamed for a logical explanation, some context that would reframe what I was seeing. But there was nothing. Just silence. A kind of cold, heavy silence that swallowed the music outside. She looked up and saw me. She didn't gasp. Didn't leap back in horror. She just stood. Smoothed her dress. Patted her hair. As if she'd just been tying his shoe or adjusting his cufflinks. She walked over like nothing had happened. Josh, she said, smiling like I'd brought the wrong pizza to a party. You didn't call. Why didn't you call? I was still staring at Garrett. He sat there coolly, legs wide, watching me like I was an interruption in his evening rather than Layla's fiancé. I turned back to her. What? What is this? Layla tilted her head. Garrett wasn't feeling well. He said he couldn't breathe. I was helping. Helping? I laughed. It wasn't even a real laugh. Just air forcing itself through disbelief. With what? I asked. Helping him with his zipper? Her expression didn't change. Don't be ridiculous, she said calmly. I told you he has anxiety. Sometimes he has trouble catching his breath. In your lap. I didn't mean for the words to come out so loud. A few women on the couch, her coworkers, I guessed, went quiet. One of them looked away. The rest acted like they weren't watching, but I could feel their eyes on us. Layla crossed her arms. I can't believe you came here like this. It's my night. It hit me then how unfazed she was. How rehearsed. As if she had prepped for this moment, not to explain it, but to control it. To redirect. Like I was the one who had messed up. I looked at her again, really looked. The woman in front of me wasn't the same one I'd proposed to on that lakeside trail with shaking hands and a heart full of hope. This version of her was composed. Too composed. She wasn't scared, she was annoyed. I thought I'd surprise you, I said softly. She glanced at the box in my hand and then back at me. You did. I didn't have it in me to argue. My hand dropped to my side. The box felt like it weighed 100 pounds now. I nodded once and turned toward the door. Josh, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to see her face anymore, not if it looked that calm. Not if it could look like that after everything. Downstairs, the club was still alive, people still laughing and drinking as if nothing had happened. I stepped into the street, the cold air wrapping around me like clarity. I opened my hand and looked at the box. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, heartbroken in the quietest, most irreversible way. After that night, I stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie in bed next to Layla. Yes, I still came home to her, we still shared the same space, and stare at the ceiling for hours trying to make sense of what I saw. Or more accurately, what I was supposed to believe I saw. Garrett wasn't feeling well. That was the explanation I was given. And I was supposed to buy it. Supposed to nod, smile, and pretend that my fiancé didn't just spring up from between another man's legs with a glazed-over calm like nothing was out of place. But something had shifted inside me that night. Something silent and irreversible. Like a pin had been pulled on a grenade that hadn't exploded yet, but I could feel it ticking. The morning after the party, Layla acted like we'd simply had a small disagreement. She brought me coffee, kissed my cheek, and told me about her day as if we hadn't nearly imploded just 12 hours prior. It was disorienting, the way she wore normalcy like armor. And the scariest part? She was good at it. That's when my mind started revisiting moments I had brushed aside before. Incidents I chalked up to stress, bad timing, or my own insecurity. But now they screamed at me, begged me to take a second look. I remembered the sneakers first. A few months ago, I'd gone to grab the spare tire jack from Layla's trunk. We were supposed to take a road trip to her cousin's cabin, and I wanted to make sure we had everything in case something went wrong. When I lifted the hatch, there was a pair of men's running shoes tucked in the corner, clean, but worn. Size 12. I held one up, puzzled. I wore size 10. Her brother? Maybe. But her brother lived 2 states away and had flat feet. I remembered that because Layla had once mentioned how hard it was for him to find good shoes. She told me when I asked that they were his. He left them in there the last time he visited. I keep forgetting to ship them back. I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to question her. Then there was the note. It slipped out of her purse when she dropped it one night. We were getting ready for a movie and she'd bent over to grab her keys. A folded piece of paper slid out and I picked it up without thinking. The handwriting was bold and slanted, decidedly masculine. The ink was a deep blue, like a gel pen. It said, "Can't stop thinking about last time. Call me when he's asleep." There was no name. Just a heart scribbled beneath the message. I remember freezing, standing in the hallway with that note in my hand. My throat went dry. Layla looked over her shoulder, saw what I was holding, and without missing a beat, plucked it from my fingers. "It's from my friend Candace's boyfriend. He wrote it as a joke. We were messing around, writing fake notes, and pretending we were having affairs. She dared me to carry it in my purse for a week. She laughed like it was the dumbest thing in the world. And I laughed too. Like an idiot. Now, I started seeing all those details in a new light. Her perfume, that sharp, unfamiliar scent she suddenly started wearing in April. Layla used to love subtle vanilla or floral tones, but this new one was heavy, musky, and left a trail behind her like she'd walked through someone else's world. When I asked, she told me it was a free sample from a client. She said she'd go back to her old perfume soon. She didn't. Then her wardrobe changed. Layla was always stylish, but suddenly it was different: shorter skirts, tighter blouses, higher heels. At first, I chalked it up to confidence. She was climbing the ladder at work after all. Maybe she just wanted to dress the part. But there was a new edge to her look, something curated for attention, for admiration. And not from me. The nights grew longer, too. She'd come home late, breathless and apologetic. Client meeting ran over. Garrett wanted to go over next quarter's numbers. The printer jammed and we had to redo the entire deck. Every excuse was businesslike and each one came with just enough specificity to disarm suspicion. I was proud of her. At least, I told myself I was. She was working hard. She was in demand. I didn't want to be the insecure fiancé asking why she kept getting home at midnight. But it wasn't just the time. It was her body language. When I reached for her in bed, she turned her back. When I kissed her neck, she winced like it tickled. When I wrapped my arms around her waist, she stepped away under the guise of needing to pee or grab a phone charger. I started feeling like an intruder in my own relationship. Like my presence was being tolerated instead of welcomed. We stopped laughing together. We stopped dancing in the kitchen. She stopped asking about my day. And worst of all, I stopped bringing it up. I convinced myself she was stressed. That she needed space. That I should support her, give her time. That love was patience and sacrifice and trust. But now I wasn't sure what I'd been trusting. I found myself watching her, cataloging her habits. Who she texted. What time she got up. How often she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I started timing her showers. They got longer, as did her trips to the store. Once I followed her car after she said she was going to pick up a gift for her mother's birthday. She drove in the opposite direction. When I confronted her later, she said she'd decided to stop by her coworker Jenny's house first to get a second opinion. I said okay. Of course I did. Because that's what I did back then. I said okay. But now the pieces were starting to fit. Not into a neat picture, no. Into something messier, uglier. A smear of reality that made my stomach clench. There was one night, around 2 in the morning, when I heard her whispering on the phone in the bathroom. I barely made it to the door before she hung up. I knocked, asked if she was all right. She opened it with her face wet and said she'd just been crying because of a work deadline. It's nothing, she said. I'm just tired. That's what she always said. And she said it with just enough exhaustion that I felt like the jerk for even asking. But I couldn't stop asking. Not anymore. Not in my head anyway. Because here's what they don't tell you about betrayal: it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with paper cuts. 1,000 tiny things that bleed you out slowly until one day you look down and realize you're already gone. And I was gone. Emotionally, mentally, I had started to exit the relationship piece by piece. I was still there physically, going through the motions, saying the right things. But in my mind, I was spiraling through every little detail I'd ignored for far too long. That night at the club was a rupture. But the fracture had been forming for months. Now I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unfeel it. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. But I knew this: the next time she lied to me, I'd be ready. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was awake. There's a moment in every unraveling when denial collapses. When it's no longer a question of doubt but of confirmation. I had reached that point. After weeks of quiet observation, of turning every memory over like stones in my hand, I needed more than suspicion. I needed the truth, something physical, something I could point to and say, this is what it really is. Layla's old laptop was my starting point. She used to bring it everywhere before she got her new work-issued MacBook. She said the old one was too slow, but she hadn't thrown it out. It was shoved in the back of the linen closet, tucked beneath beach towels and a box of expired holiday lights. That's where I found it on a Saturday morning while she was at brunch with the girls. I powered it up. It took a minute, fan whirring like it was gasping for air. Her login screen appeared. She never changed the password. I typed in August 12th, the date we first met, and it opened. I told myself I was just looking. That I wouldn't go deep unless I had to. But the first clue came quicker than I expected. In the downloads folder, I found deleted files. Not fully gone, just sitting in the recycle bin like someone had meant to clean up but didn't quite finish the job. There were PDFs of flight confirmations, photo backups from an SD card, and audio files with names like retreat_voice1.m4a. Curious, I opened one of the PDFs. It was an itinerary for a weekend in Highview Lake Cabins. Check-in on the same Friday. She told me she was flying to Chicago for a real estate summit. It was booked for 2 people. No conference center. No business contact. I opened the next file, a photo backup folder from her phone, auto-synced before she deactivated the feature. I clicked through cautiously, heart thudding. Then I saw it. A series of pictures clearly not meant for my eyes. Layla on a wooden dock, laughing in a sundress. Garrett in board shorts, behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. The angle suggested the camera wasn't on a timer. Someone else took it. Or maybe it was a video screenshot *T. Either way, it was in *mate. 2 in *mate. The background changed, inside a cabin. Wine glasses clinked in a boomerang. A bed with rumpled sheets. A mirror selfie, Layla in his t-shirt. Garrett's face just out of frame but his hand unmistakably around her hip. I clicked on one video file. Just over 40 seconds long. She was sitting on a couch, hair wet, makeup faint. It's not that I don't love him, she said. It's just practical. If we break up before the wedding, I lose everything: half the lease, the deposit, the bookings. So I'm just waiting. Playing nice. Garrett off-screen: so you're really gonna marry him? She shrugged. Just for a little while. It'll make the split cleaner when I file. Maybe I get sympathy, maybe I don't. Either way, I'm not walking away empty-handed. The video cut off. I don't remember breathing during that clip. My lungs felt vacuum-sealed. There were text notes too. In her notes app, accessible through iCloud, synced to the laptop. One caught my eye immediately. It was titled TDO before September. I opened it. Email venue confirmation. Confirm vows length with officiant. Garrett, talk about logistics again. Backup files: Josh doesn't check old laptop. Delete photos from iCloud. Figure out prenup angle. It wasn't a wedding prep list. It was an operation. There was one more message buried at the bottom of her notes, a paragraph titled Rehearsal Dinner Plan Backup. It said, if he starts asking questions, steer into stress. Work has been *ing me. Say we're just in a slump like all couples. Cry if needed. Don't overdo it. Leave some doubt. Doubt is safer than denial. Doubt. That's what she'd been feeding me for months. Carefully rationed ambiguity. Just enough plausible excuses to keep me confused, compliant, and quiet. But now? There was no room left for doubt. I sat back in the chair and stared at the dim screen. My reflection stared back, paler, harder around the eyes. This was it. The proof. Not just of betrayal, but of strategy. Of intent. This wasn't emotional confusion. It was calculated. Cold. Everything she had said about Garrett, about those late nights, about that moment in the lounge, it was all part of the cover. And I had believed it. I'd wanted to believe it. But not anymore. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I copied everything to a thumb drive. Photos. Videos. Notes. Email threads. I organized them by date, labeled each file. I wasn't sure what I would do with them yet, but I knew I had to be prepared. I uploaded everything to a private cloud folder, set with a secure password only I knew. Then I sat in the quiet of our apartment, listening to the refrigerator hum. The walls felt closer now. The air heavier. I had the truth. I had all of it. And strangely, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like mourning. Mourning the version of her I thought I knew. Mourning the life I thought we were building. Mourning the fact that I hadn't just lost her, I had never really had her. And now I was done pretending. There was no confrontation. No slammed doors. No accusations shouted across the kitchen. No midnight ultimatums or emotional breakdowns. That part only happens in movies or in relationships where one side still believes they can salvage the truth. Me? I'd already buried it. Once I had the proof, the decision came surprisingly easy. Something inside me just shut off. Not in a dramatic way. Not with rage or heartbreak. It was more like flipping a breaker. The lights went out in my heart and I never tried to turn them back on. That Monday morning, I made myself coffee like usual. Layla was already gone, an early client breakfast, allegedly. I stared out the window, sipped from my chipped mug, and mapped the next few weeks in my head like a general planning a retreat. Not a war. A retreat. Because I wasn't fighting her. I was leaving her. First, the financials. I opened our joint account and began shifting small amounts into my personal savings, nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise flags. I set up a second bank account in my name only with a different bank entirely. I redirected my paycheck, adjusted direct deposits. I scanned through every shared subscription and quietly unsubscribed from each one under my name. Netflix, Spotify, grocery delivery. I didn't want her watching shows I paid for while pretending nothing had happened. Next was the tech. I changed every password I owned, email, cloud storage, credit cards, work logins. I removed my thumbprint from her phone and turned off location sharing. I wiped my browsing history, installed two-factor authentication. My digital presence had to become separate from hers. I wasn't going to leave a breadcrumb trail for someone who had already deleted me emotionally. Then came the apartment. We lived in a sleek third-floor condo in the heart of the city, all white walls and stainless steel, soulless but expensive. I couldn't stay. Not just because she'd made it hers in every way, but because I knew what she was planning. There was a line in one of her saved notes. Something about staging the separation so she'd come out looking like the victim. She wanted control of the narrative. The cheated woman holding her life together while her inattentive fiancé drifted away. She wanted sympathy. I wasn't going to give her the chance. I started apartment hunting in secret. Studio spaces. Month-to-month leases. I found one across the city. Small, a little dated, but private and quiet. A third-floor walk-up above a coffee shop with a single window facing west. I signed the lease under my initials and used a private mailbox for all future correspondence. I didn't even tell my family, not yet. The plan wasn't to disappear overnight. The plan was to become invisible before she even realized I was fading. Each evening, I began packing discreetly. Just the essentials, my books, laptop, passport, favorite hoodie. I left the photos on the walls. The framed engagement pictures. The bookshelf full of novels she never read but insisted we display. The gifts from her parents. I left all of it untouched. She couldn't know. Not yet. The trick was consistency. Routine. I smiled at dinner. I asked about her day. I offered to do dishes. I sent her texts during work. If anything, I became the picture of affection. Polite, present, supportive. She didn't question it. If anything, she seemed relieved. Maybe she thought I'd finally gotten over that night at the club. Maybe she believed her lie about Garrett's anxiety. Maybe she didn't care. I didn't ask. I didn't bring it up. I didn't even look at her phone again. What was the point? Some nights she came home late and launched into stories about how exhausted she was. Back-to-back meetings. Garrett's K** ling us with these deadlines. I nodded. You must be tired, I'd say. Other nights, she'd sit beside me on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling her phone with a slight smirk on her face. I stopped wondering who she was texting. It didn't matter. I'd already emotionally unplugged. I was just running out the clock. In the meantime, I backed up everything. I uploaded the photos, videos, and notes to a private cloud account and made encrypted copies on 2 flash drives. One hidden in a book I hollowed out and stored at the new apartment, the other in a lockbox at my office. I drafted a document outlining the timeline of events, dates, details, digital trails. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew how stories get rewritten. I wouldn't be caught off guard. And just in case things turned messy, I consulted a lawyer. I didn't retain him, not yet, but I wanted my questions answered. What would happen if we split before the wedding? Who would get what? What were my rights if Layla tried to spin this? He was efficient and thorough. When I told him about the videos and text logs, he simply nodded. You're smart to plan this quietly, he said. People like her tend to panic when they lose control. That line stuck with me, so I maintained the illusion. We hosted a dinner party 2 weekends before the wedding. Her friends came over, and Layla floated around the room like nothing had changed. She smiled, poured wine, laughed too loudly. I played the doting fiancé. Everyone commented on how happy we seemed. I almost admired her. It was like watching someone play both lead actress and director in a film no one else realized was fiction. But I had my own role, too. Each morning, I carried another box to the new apartment. Slowly, silently, my half of the closet grew thinner, my bookshelves sparser. But she never noticed. Or maybe she didn't want to. The weekend before the wedding, I stood in what used to be our shared bedroom, looking at the life I was about to leave behind. The bed we picked out together, the dresser she filled with candles and Polaroids, the engagement ring I hadn't seen her wear in days, sitting in a trinket dish like it meant nothing. That's when I realized she wasn't planning a future with me. She was staging an ending she thought she could control. But I wasn't going to give her the ending she wanted. I was writing my own. I didn't ask her to meet. That would have implied a negotiation, a desire to reconcile. No, I simply told her the time and place. A quiet cafe on the East End. One of those places with exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and the illusion of privacy. I chose it because it was neutral. Neither of us had memories there. I didn't want to give her anything familiar to cling to. She arrived late. Of course. I was already seated when she walked in, dressed like she was going to a networking event. Tailored skirt, sleek heels, blazer slightly too sharp for a casual coffee. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair pinned in that careful, effortless way that takes at least 45 minutes to pull off. She spotted me instantly, waved like nothing was wrong. Hey, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Sorry, traffic was insane. I didn't reply, just watched her. She noticed the folder on the table, slim, matte black, and closed neatly. Her eyes lingered for half a second, then returned to mine. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. So, what's going on? She asked, voice light. You sounded kind of serious in your message. That's when I slid the folder across the table. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were printed *TS, dozens of them. Messages, emails, photo timestamps. A full timeline labeled and indexed. Beneath there were transcriptions of the videos I found. Her notes about the wedding, the backup plans, the strategy. A short summary I wrote at the end titled, The Real Story. I didn't speak while she flipped through it. Page by page, the facade melted. At first, she kept the composed look, chin lifted, breathing steady. But by page 6, the color drained from her face. Her fingers trembled slightly when she turned the next one. I could tell she reached the video transcript by the way her eyes froze midline. When she looked up, her mouth opened, then closed again. Silence. Finally, she said, Where did you get this? I shrugged. You didn't delete as much as you thought. She blinked, processing. Josh, No, my voice was calm level. I'm not here to hear explanations. She glanced down at the folder again, then back at me. It's not what it looks like. Garrett and I things got complicated. But it wasn't, she swallowed. I was confused. I didn't plan to hurt you. I tilted my head. Didn't you? She said nothing. I leaned forward. That night at the club, what was the plan? If I hadn't shown up, what would have happened? Would you have told me anything? Or were you just going to walk down the aisle like none of it mattered? I didn't know you were coming, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia said you might surprise me, but I didn't think. Mia knew. Her eyes widened. No, not about that. Just that you had the necklace. She thought it would be sweet. I nodded slowly. She lied for you. Layla looked down, her confidence crumbling. Josh, I made a mistake. A lot of mistakes. But that weekend at the lake, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. He was there, and I felt her voice cracked. I didn't know how to get out. You didn't want to. She blinked. That's not fair. I sat back in my chair. Neither was any of this. She stared at me for a moment, her eyes brimming with something, tears, maybe, or just fear. Are you going to tell my family? No. Her brow furrowed. Then, what happens now? I stood up. She stayed seated, mouth slightly open like she expected more. Some closing statement. A final jab. A grand exit. But I didn't give her one. I picked up my coffee, walked to the counter, tossed it into the bin, and left. Behind me, she didn't follow. Didn't call my name. Didn't say sorry again. She just sat there with the folder in front of her, the performance finally over. Outside, the late afternoon air hit me like a reset button. Not cold. Not warm. Just real. The strange thing was I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel heartbroken either. There was no storm in my chest. No trembling hands or racing thoughts. What I felt was emptiness. But it wasn't the devastating kind. It was quiet. Clean. A space had opened inside me where all the noise used to be. Where the arguments, suspicions, and rationalizations had once lived. Where I used to replay every kiss and conversation, wondering when the shift had started. That space was clear now. She was out of it. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I got into my car, drove back to the studio apartment across the city, and stood in the middle of my new space. Just stood there. A table. A bed. A lamp. A suitcase half unpacked. It didn't feel like home. But it didn't feel like a lie either. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No texts. I imagined Layla back at the cafe, flipping through that folder again, trying to find some loophole in the truth. Trying to rewrite the script. But there wasn't one anymore. I'd removed myself from the plot. She tried to reach out, of course. First, the texts. Then emails. Then voice messages filled with soft sobs and strained apologies. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to most of them. I'd see the notification, read the first few words, and swipe them away like dust on a windowsill. It wasn't about punishment. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just didn't need anything from her anymore. After the meeting at the cafe, I left town for a while. I used some of my saved vacation days, packed my essentials, and drove down to Austin, a city I'd always liked but never spent real time in. I found a short-term rental near the lake, close enough to the water that I could smell it in the morning when I cracked open the windows. There was peace there, in the rhythm of days without confrontation. I woke up when I wanted, cooked whatever I felt like, walked with no destination. There was no ring on my finger, no weight on my chest. I didn't rush to move on. I wasn't looking for another relationship, and I didn't fill the silence with distractions. I just lived. Slowly, fully. And in that stillness, I started remembering the version of myself before Layla. Before the doubt. Before the games. She kept trying, though. After a week of silence, a letter arrived at the rental's mailbox. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting immediately. Josh, please read this. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I can't stop thinking about us. About who we were. Maybe we still have something to save. You once said we don't walk away from people we love. I'm hoping that still means something to you. I didn't even open it. I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. The version of us she missed never really existed. Not in the way I thought, anyway. And I wasn't about to crawl back into the illusion. A few weeks later, I started consulting with a small firm. Remote work, flexible hours, just enough structure to give my days meaning without caging me. I even bought a used kayak and took it out on the water every other weekend. The quiet helped. The sunlight helped. I helped myself. And that became the core of my healing, not revenge, not confrontation. Just separation. Just space. Just choosing myself over the noise. I didn't tell her family. Didn't blow up her workplace. Didn't out Garrett to his own fiancée, though I knew he had one from a Facebook search. I had all the evidence. I had the power. But I let it sit in the cloud and rot. Not because I was noble, but because I didn't want to be tethered to her any longer. Even through payback. One morning I got another envelope. Different handwriting this time. Inside was a card with the words, "I'll never stop regretting this," and nothing else. I assumed it was her. The paper smelled faintly like the perfume she'd started wearing during those final months. This time I didn't tear it in half. I burned it. That was my final goodbye. Not to her, but to the version of me that once thought love meant enduring everything. Even the lies. Even the quiet betrayals. Now I knew better. Letting go wasn't about forgetting. It was about deciding that some battles aren't worth winning because the cost is keeping the war alive inside you. So I let go. Not of her. Of the illusion. And that made all the difference.